is an Odyssey original.
This is War in Ukraine Daily. I'm Charles Feldman.
I'm Mike Simpson from the KNX Odyssey Studios in Los Angeles. Peace talks in Turkey today. Russian and Ukrainian negotiators were said to make some progress. Still no end in sight to the fighting, though. Russia says it is halting military operations around Kyiv. U.S. intelligence, however, not buying it. They see a repositioning of forces, not a withdrawal. We'll take a closer look. We will go back into Ukraine as well, talk with a journalist who, before the invasion, was writing about culture and issues of the day, now focused on helping people struggling during the fighting.
Well, we start with peace talks. Turkey's foreign minister says there's been a consensus and common understanding on some issues. How much closer are we to ending this war? Robert English is the director of Central European Studies at USC and an expert on domestic and foreign politics of Russia and Eastern Europe. We've heard so many times throughout this war about meetings and negotiations between the two sides, with nothing new to show for it. So what do you make of this latest meetup in Turkey?
I am slightly encouraged after so many disappointments. As you correctly point out, there have been a lot of meetings, of rounds of negotiations with absolutely no progress. But, a war only ends, a ceasefire only comes into place when both sides are exhausted and neither one can gain much more, and they start having a common interest in stopping the fighting. And we're getting close to that. We're not there yet, but we know that while Russia can send missile strikes and still do a ton of damage, they can't seem to take any territory. And in fact, they're being forced into an early retreat. So it's not looking good for them. They're not going to conquer Ukraine, and they now know it. And their army's hollowed out, and it's weakened, and it's demoralized, and it could be on the edge of collapse in another few weeks if they don't halt the fighting. Ukraine, for its part, is absolutely exhausted. The country is being destroyed. And so, sadly, all this destruction and degradation on both sides has finally brought them close to a ceasefire.
Do we believe Russia in the actual scaling back of the fighting around Kyiv? Because some people are saying, okay, well, they made a huge mistake by thinking they were going to take the country in one fell swoop. So now what they're doing is they're going to fall back, they're going to regroup, they're going to go in piece by piece. And then also while they're at it, they're going to keep on shelling while they regroup themselves.
I've been following the military side really closely, and that includes not only the incidents of mutiny, of disobedience, of demoralization on the front, but also their really serious problems in recruiting to find reinforcements, both human and material. They don't have the tanks. They are cannibalizing older models for spare parts. They are having trouble calling up recruits. It's going really badly, and the public is resisting. And so on that side, I'm more encouraged that Russia will not be able to do what some worry about, what you described. You're right. We won't know for sure. The proof is in the pudding, and I think President Biden is probably right here to say, I'll believe it when I see it. But I just don't see how Russia can mount a new offensive with any success, especially as we continue to arm the Ukrainians with the weapons to resist that.
Okay, so provided that there is a diplomatic solution, who ends up, in your view, with the upper hand in that solution? Does Putin walk away with a sizable enough, and I'm putting the word victory in quotes, victory that he could sell it, if he needs to sell it, to the Russian people as a total victory? Or does he withdraw his troops having gained really nothing except perhaps the disgust of the world?
I think he will try to hold on to that modest additional territory on the interior around Crimea, connecting the Crimean area with the Donbass. It's not much. It's maybe at 4 or 5% of Ukrainian territory. Everything else he's tried and has not been able to hold. I think still, when you're the propagandist in chief and you have, state media dominating, you can sell anything as a victory. And he can claim, if Ukraine agrees to some kind of no NATO or neutral status, which is being floated now, if they agree to that, and he has this little bit of territory gained in the Donbass region, yeah, that's more than enough for him to claim victory, even though we all know it is a stinging defeat in terms of what he tried to achieve, which was total conquest.
Is it Ukraine and the resistance? Was it Putin drinking his own Kool-Aid? Or back to the military side of things, was the Russian army really never that up to the task, even though the rest of the world thought they might have been?
People in my business are going to be digesting this and having fun analyzing it for years. And I think it's probably some of both. I think you put your finger on both sides. The army wasn't as good as we thought. And I think that's because of the corruption. It's because the competence and diversity that Putin had in his government in the early years, where he had competing advisors. He had a lot of technocrats, a lot of experts, and they contended and they debated and they came up with, pretty reasonable policies. That's all gone. The Putin of recent years has, shut himself off. He's been more isolated. He's gotten rid of all original thinkers and only yes men are there. And yeah, they told him his army was great and it wasn't. They told him they were ready to conquer and they weren't. So they were feeding him Kool-Aid, but he was asking for it. It was that dilemma of an autocrat where everyone is afraid to say something that displeases them. They fed him the Kool-Aid, but they felt they had no choice. And the result is, a military disaster.
Robert English, Director of Central European Studies at USC. The war in Ukraine has devastated the country in so many ways. We've been hearing from people there about how their lives may never return to what was once normal.
The city of Kyiv near the Russian border has been absorbing bombardment for almost a month straight at this point. Ekaterina is a journalist there. She left Donetsk in the Donbass region in 2014 after war started there with Russian-backed separatists. She went to Kharkiv, where she helped start a media company. But since the war started last month, she has left Kharkiv. Many others who work for the company are scattered across the country and are now writing about the war. Tell us a little about what you do for a living in Ukraine.
Hi, my name is Katya. I was born in Russia and I lived there first 10 years. Last 60 years I live in Ukraine. So first 8 years I lived in Donetsk, and that was first time when Russia comes with war to my city and my home. They occupied Donetsk, and I moved to Kharkiv. And I live in Kharkiv more than 7 years. 6 years ago, I founded a media about Kharkiv, about local culture and human rights, and also on 24th of February, I woke up in the morning at 5 because I heard explosions, and my friend sent me that Katya, I'm sorry it's so early, but the war started. Wake up.
Katerina, you did say that, if I heard you correctly, that you were born in Russia. So you're ethnic Russian.
Yes, I'm ethnic Russian, and I'm that type of people which Russia came to defend. But that's how Russia defend. They took home and they took cities, and you goes on other land because there begins war.
Yeah, coming in to do what nobody asked them to do.
Yeah.
You said you have the media company. What is that like for you to still kind of trying to be running this and getting the news out to people and having all your coworkers, like we said, all around the country and doing the war coverage and worried about them?
Also, before the war, our media wrote about Kharkiv, about social projects, about local musicians, artists. But when the war started, we had like 2 or 3 days when we thought what we will do with this war. because we understood that we are not news media, and we decided to in our media to on the one side to write about war, from other side to uh, remind about this city community, because in one moment war will be finished, and we are interested, like people and like media, to see how people will back to city,
Tell,
because
can,
now many of people about which we wrote, move to other cities and to other countries.
so tell me a little bit about how, other than your business, of course, how this has impacted you and your family. Do you have, are you, I presume that you're more in the western part of Ukraine now, is that correct?
I now in Chernivtsi. It's uh, west part of Ukraine. We moved here in the first day. We spent 3 days on the way, and my family moved to Austria. But I stayed in Ukraine, and also I here worked with a project which helps Ukrainian to win in this war.
Why did you stay and not go with the family? Was it to do the coverage of the war? Did you want to try and stay and help?
Mm, because it's my land, because it's my country, because I know that I can do something to help people in Ukraine. As example, from the start of the war, we with my friends launch 2 projects. First, it's yourbrave.org. That's project which helps foreign media to connect with people from Ukraine, which can tell truth to media, and also we ask media from all countries to write about Ukraine, to write about what happened here, because it's really hell, and I think that this this war, it's not about Ukraine and Russia. It's a big question about who will win: people which defend their home, or people which came to another home and start war there. And so our first project, this You Are Brave, it helps to tell the world truth about war in Ukraine.
Do
And
you,
the second,
let me ask you
uh-huh.
something, because again, you mentioned in passing that you were born in Russia. Do you still have friends or relatives in Russia? And if so, have you been in communication with them? And what is their understanding, if that's the case, of what is actually happening?
My father still lives in Russia, but we didn't speak with him from the start of war, because he think that this war is right decision. But
He thinks it's the
it can
right
be
decision.
right.
The right
It
decision. He
Yes,
thinks.
yes. So Russia and Russian people think that if they wouldn't bomb Ukraine, um, somebody will bomb them. But it's good to say, "Oh, war is right decision," when war is not on your land, when not your children died because because it's bomb they bombed city. it's right decision when not your friends died because they don't have food because their cities occupied. In this way, it can be maybe right decision, but when war is on your land, that's never can be right decision.
What is it like for you to have him believe all this? It's your own father.
Uh, I had this thoughts from that 2014 war with Russia not started on 24th February. It started 8 years ago when they occupied Donetsk, city where I lived, and they occupied Crimea. So I thought all this shit about the right war, all this 8 year, but after 24th of February, when this war became bigger, and it really and Russia really do the hell on the whole territory of Ukraine. Mm, it's now in Ukraine we see very interesting changes in society because mm, in addition to missiles flying to our cities, we have seen how quickly the borders between people are collapsing, communication changing, and this family became not because uh, somebody became your family not because he's your relatives, but because um, he think in the way you think.
Katerina, let me interrupt because I am curious in pursuing this a bit. So you're not talking to your father who's in Russia. What about your mother? Are they separated? Is your mother still alive, or does she live with your dad in Russia?
No, no, my mother with my brother, she lives in Austria,
Austria. So
and with
your mom's
my
in
my
Austria.
and with my grandparents, and also city in Ukraine where they lived before. It was totally destroyed 2 weeks ago. Totally destroyed.
For
And now people which stayed in the city, they died every day because they don't have food, because Russian barriers don't give permission to humanitarian organizations to bring food to this city. So people really sit in basements and they die because they don't have food. Can you imagine this situation on in 21st century?
how are the family members doing that were able to get out there that are in Austria in terms of making that journey and then having somewhere to stay, now that they're there?
It's difficult for them because my family lose uh, their home. My mom and my brother at 2014, and they bought apartments 3 years ago, and they lose them again.
How do you think this is likely to end? Do you think that Ukraine is going to? There have been some comparisons made to North and South Korea, for example, that of course have been divided for quite some time now since the Korean War. Do you think that that is what is the end result of this war that Russia has imposed on Ukraine? That you'll end up being a divided country with a western part that's a sovereign country, but an eastern part, the Donbass region certainly, and maybe even the southeast part near the Odessa area as being part of Russia?
uh, no, this can't happen because if Russia wants to divide country on different parts. In beginning, they should kill all Ukrainians because all that hell what they do last month in Ukraine, um, they do Ukrainians more nationalistic than they were before that, and I think that all what they do on our land, we never will forgive them. We never will forgive them. Thousands people in Mariupol which die every day uh, because children die because they don't have water, and Ukrainians never will forgive all this shit to Russia, and they will never I don't know how how it's right to say. Ukrainians will never allow to divide their country, and Ukrainians will never give their land to Russia.
That's Katerina there, was in the Donbass region, left there after 2014, went to Kyiv, started the media company, now had to flee there because of the bombings. And as she was saying, kind of, it was a cultural kind of magazine, newspaper thing, turned it around. Now they're doing war coverage and heartbreaking. The family dynamic, the dad
in Russia
doesn't believe that any of this is happening. Mom lost her home the first go round in 2014, had to leave again, lost his home.
She's in Austria.
She's in Austria now.
Yeah. Wow.
Katerina, thanks so much for talking to us, and we wish you all the best. This is an Odyssey original. Find us and others on the Odyssey app, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and on Stitcher.